Good morning and welcome to OpenLine Online here, Sunday morning, September 29th. And it is good to be here. And we got a lot of things to discuss. And let's introduce the panel here. The familiar faces are in the room, and we have one on the way. We have one half of the Sports Brothers, Brother Bobby Childs. Good morning, Brother Bobby.
Good morning, for team. Congratulations on finding a new place for you to rest your head for you and your family.
Thank you, my brother.
It's good to be back this weekend. I had to take care of some important matters myself last week with
Yes, you did.
my daughter. So
You know, you
I'm
made
back.
me. I thought. For me, I just got to say this: when you're a parent, it's not hard to do the right thing. See,
No, not
I
at
don't want
all.
to, because sometimes we uplift and say, but we hear so much about bad parenting that we don't uplift good parenting. But Bobby, that's what you've always been, a
Yeah.
stand-up brother. But just to hear that you said last week I have to do something with my daughter. It was just touching since I have two daughters
Yeah.
myself, and I always put them first, and especially have a wife who dealt and deals with sickle cell anemia.
And I did watch the stream afterwards, and I did see a lot of your comments. So thank you for continuing to tune in and listen and engage with us.
And that's a way of getting the attention off of him.
Exactly. Moving right along.
You're so funny.
Next to Bobby is journalist Nitha Khan. Good morning, Sister
Good
Nitha.
morning. Good to be
And,
back with you guys.
Yes, welcome. And yeah, you've been missing in action. Mhm.
I've been, covering important things.
Yes, you have been. We'll talk about some of those things you've been covering, too. Sitting next to our good sister Nitha is Brother Protest, Brother Larry Ham. How are you, sir, this morning?
I'm good. I'm a little tired. Just in from Atlantic City.
Wow. Last week it was the Carolinas, now Atlantic City.
Yeah, Atlantic City. The New Jersey State Democratic Party had their conference in Atlantic City this weekend, and guess who showed up? Someone we'll be speaking about today.
right.
Nancy Pelosi showed up and had some interesting things to say.
Oh, good.
So,
I'm glad you were there. So.
I'm glad I was there too. It was an experience. I'm thinking that this might have been actually the first state Democratic Party conference in New Jersey that I attended. But it's a reflection, I think, of the current state chairman's leadership, John Curry, who is an African American from Passaic County, New Jersey. I met John Curry back in '84 during the first Jackson campaign, and I think he's trying to expand the tent of the Democratic Party. So knowing that, I'm a supporter of Bernie Sanders, he wanted to make sure that wing of the party
Was
was represented. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. And sitting right next to Brother Larry Ham is attorney and former judge Bob Pickett on his way to church this morning.
That's the same thing I said.
With his tie on this morning. Good morning, Brother Pickett.
Good morning, Fatim, and good morning to all the folks out there watching us and listening to us. We're going to have a very interesting conversation on
A lot
Trump.
of issues out there.
Yeah.
Well, let me just say this real quick. We're a team. And we jump into discussions. As Bobby said, it was a move for me this week. So like I said, I had no internet. I didn't work on no rundowns. So we're just going to just jump right on in and have some
But
good
just
discussion.
a question on that, right? So you
Yes.
said you had no internet, right? So did it take you back to the days when there was no internet? Did you have peace and solitude?
I actually
and like,
miss that.
Right.
I had a good time. It felt good. It really felt good that I wasn't pressed. You just back to the old days. I didn't have a phone. I mean, I had my cell phone,
Right.
but didn't have a house phone, no television. So how did we entertain ourselves? Radio and communicate with everybody, interact in the house with everyone. It was a breath of fresh air.
That's good. That's good. Yes.
So yes, going back to the Flintstone era, yeah, it was really nice. And then fast forward to the Jetson era now. But of course, in the news this week, the top story is our President Trump and the whole thing about impeachment. And I'm going to turn it over to Bobby Childs to talk about the story, and then let the team chime in on what has taken place this week.
Well, there's been stories that have been out there for a few weeks now that there's been a whistleblower in the government who the way it goes is when whistleblowers come forth, there's a process where it should go to Congress. And Adam Schiff has been putting pressure on the national, with the DNI to actually share who this whistleblower was. So they had heard stories about this whistleblower. The story goes that instead of coming to Congress as the procedure calls for, it ended up going up to the Justice Department and to the White House to say whether or not this whistleblower's case can come forward. And the Justice Department and the White House said, no, it cannot. And so this has been going around in the background for a while. And then the news media got into it, and you start to hear that the case or the claim had to do with a conversation that President Trump had with the leader of the Ukraine. And with more digging, what comes out is that a couple of months ago, well, earlier this year, Congress had approved some financial aid to the Ukraine. And it's to help the Ukraine in their defense against Russia. And, for many of you out there realize that Russia, took over Crimea a few years ago and has been trying to reclaim Ukraine to make it, the great Soviet Union again. And so the U.S. has been providing financial aid and support for the Ukraine. So that money was held up, and no one could understand why. And so the story goes that this conversation was Trump's attempt to do a quid pro quo, which is, I'll give you the money if you can dig up dirt on Joe Biden. And so what's the angle on Joe Biden? Well, Joe Biden, when he was vice president, Ukraine was the country that he was interfacing with a lot on behalf of President Obama. And they were trying to clean up the corruption in the Ukraine. They had a prosecutor there who, not just Joe Biden, but many other European countries felt was not doing his job correctly, where he was not investigating corruption the way it should be done. And so Joe Biden had said back then that unless they fire this prosecutor, the U.S. was not going to withhold funds. But the important part of the story there was that Joe Biden was saying he's not doing his job. I'll come back to that later on. And then the other thing that happened with the Bidens is that his son became a board member of one of the companies in the Ukraine that was being investigated for corruption. So now the story breaks that the president did come out, Trump did come out and say, yes, I did have the conversation that met what the whistleblower said happened. The White House released not the actual transcript, but a summary of the conversation. And with more digging,
Which was still damning.
Which was still damning. And it's a funny story, right? Side story. Chris Christie, he was on one of the talk shows, and he was asked by George Stephanopoulos what he thought of it, and he said, "Oh, it's not bad. It would only be bad if the president was to say, 'Could you do me a favor?'" That was earlier in the day. Later that day, when the summary came out, in the summary it says, "I'd like you to do me a favor." And so there's this whole talk about it being the way that the mob asks for things, right? It's like, you do me this favor, I do you this favor. So now the latest that has come out is not only did he say those things to dig up dirt on a political opponent, but to preserve, because so many people knew something was wrong in that conversation, that those transcripts were locked in a lockbox that is a certain code for it. And the intention of this lockbox is to put things in there that are truly of national security, missions against, Osama bin Laden, going after terrorist cells, those kind of things. So they put the accusation is they put these in there to save him from political damage because he clearly said something that he wasn't supposed to say. And now there's a big question: how many other conversations with Putin and other dignitaries are actually locked up because he can't control himself and he says the wrong things.
Yep.
Good summary.
That's right. So,
Good summary.
And it's amazing that President Trump went after Hillary Clinton about servers, and now you're playing this whole situation, is moving these things around for, on servers, trying to protect yourself, and then now you're caught. You're caught, and now you're trying to bully your way through. The question now, Pelosi finally has come out and says, okay, now we're moving to see if we're going to impeach the president. The momentum now of the country. What do you think now with the momentum? Do you think that the country will get behind her, or is it to the point we have to see what comes out of this investigation?
Oh yeah, they still actually. I think it was this morning. It was an ABC News poll that came out. It said 2/3 of people want to see more about this and think that something went wrong and believe there's reason enough to dig into this and look into it. So I think the momentum, I always said it's been there, but now there's like more proof of it being there. So this is why I think Pelosi also felt comfortable finally coming out and saying there's enough there, and we need to actually have this inquiry and see what's going on. So my only concern now is they're off for, is it 2 weeks now on a recess? Right. So it's like in that time, unfortunately the news cycle is so ridiculous that what happens today will be an old story tomorrow. So they just have to make sure that they keep up the narrative and the momentum and keep it going for these 2 weeks before they return.
Well, Adam Schiff has said, they're going to work, the Democrats are going to work through these 2 weeks, and evidence of that already is
right, but I mean, like keeping it in the public eye.
Yeah, I think what they'll do is, you saw one of it was they subpoenaed Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State. And so I do believe that you're going to see subpoenas be issued during this 2-week period, which will keep it in the news to say who else is now scheduled to come in front of the of Congress and give their testimony on it. One of the other things that is interesting around that, the Kurt Volker, who is the special envoy to the Ukraine, who is in the midst of all of this, he actually resigned his position a couple of days ago. Now, one of the things around that is the story coming out from his corner is part of the reason he did it is so that he has the freedom to testify if called for in front of Congress. And as we've seen, the White House has done everything to suppress other people's testimony, citing executive privilege and everything. But it's also known that if you're no longer working for the government, you have a degree of freedom. So he'll be interesting, and I think the media is going to stay on him to understand what does he know, because he's been the one facilitating conversations, along with the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, which we'll have to talk about as well.
I don't think there's going to be a problem with public attention, with publicity, because there are 6 committees connected now to the impeachment effort. Among the 6 are the House Judiciary Committee with Schiff, the Oversight Committee with Cummins, and the Judicial Committee with Nadler. So, and then there are 3 other committees that are also investigating. So I don't think we're going to have a problem with public attention. But, we have to keep in mind that certainly public attention, narrative, personalities, etc., all play a role and are part of the picture, we can't forget the overriding fact here. It's a question of criminal behavior. And regardless of whether it's popular or not, they have to pursue this because there's evidence of criminal wrongdoing. And, sometimes, we're so focused on the political, and we should be. I'm not saying we shouldn't be focused on the political, but sometimes we're so focused on the political, we forget that the legal question looms and something must be done. The other thing is that Pelosi is compelled to go forward. She's compelled because now there are 218 votes in the House for impeachment, and that is a majority of the House of Representatives, and you would need a majority to pass articles of impeachment. And I think one of the reasons she was pushed over was because is the number 7 of the so-called purple district Congress people, including one from New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill, who had been kind of on the line because they come from districts that have a lot of Republicans. These 7 came out with a statement saying impeachment is in order. And I think that also gave some comfort to Pelosi. You know, I am for impeachment. But at the same time, I have some understanding of Speaker Pelosi's position, even though my position was different from hers. She is the Speaker of the House. She has to, you know, her power rests on the fact whether or not she has a majority.
Right.
And she doesn't want to lose that majority. So I understand that, but the majority is there now. So they have to go forward with this, whether it's popular or not. But I predict this. I predict that within the next 30 days, a majority of the country will be in favor of impeachment. Whether or not that actually happens, the House is going to have to pass articles of impeachment. What happens in the Senate is another thing, but I think already we've seen shifts in the polls.
Yeah. So just to your point, right? And so this is where some of the silliness comes in as well, right? So CNN highlighted Mickey Sherrill and 4 other white freshman congresswomen. And so now what's brewing out there, and you see it floating on social media, is, wait a minute, what about AOC and Tlaib and Maxine Waters and Al Green, who've been on impeachment from day one?
Right.
How come the media is not giving them credit?
Right.
And now you're shifting it. But you touched upon it, right? The difference here is that they had recently won to swing the House in favor of the Democrats. And what Pelosi is playing, she's trying to play, you know, checkers or chess on multiple levels out there. One of them is to retain the House. Right. The other one is to get him impeached. And so she's playing a balancing act. In order for her to do it, I agree with you, Larry, the reason she came forward is the evidence is a lot clearer, and she now has support from these freshman representatives who say, you know what, I'm willing to take the risk to, if I lose my seat, to go after this because this is wrong. And I think that's what gave her the impetus to do it.
She also has, like you said, the freshmen. She also has the support of some of the folks that didn't want to move ahead with impeachment. Now she has the support of them.
That's a lie we say.
Yeah. But one of the things I want to come to New York, Amsterdam, Jamie Harris.
Good morning.
Is
Good
that,
morning.
Your newspaper has been saying on front page every week that the president must go. And now we're here. We have this impeachment inquiry going. What are your thoughts now?
You know, first, I want to disagree with those who say the evidence, and I know that's a statement that, you know, many people agree with, is clearer now. From day one, when the Mueller report was released and there was clear obstruction, to me, you couldn't have more compelling evidence. Pelosi continued to take the temperature of the American public for the sole reason, as Bobby stated, to retain the seats and possibly retain the seats of those who are in purple districts. I thought that was something that she should have never considered, because at the end of the day, the House has an obligation. You took an oath. Everyone in the House of Representatives took an oath to uphold the Constitution, to uphold the ethics and integrity. Let's forget the morality. We know this guy is, I mean, immorality is just runs through his veins. But from a standpoint of upholding the Constitution, that was their obligation. So to me, to engage in political calculus from day one was something that I completely disagree with. And as you said, Fatine, our newspaper, and we disagree with that. We said, hey, like Al Green, like Maxine Waters, from day one, impeachment should have been the number one option and the only option.
On the table.
Should have been on the table, and they should have moved on it. Now, that I think we have even more evidence, additional evidence, that this man, and he wants to use the word treason. Well, he's committing treason. He's committing treason. And so, again, I think because the public, and as you said, Larry, I think, some polls right now, it's a majority of the country. It's over 50%. But I do think by the end of October, you will see those numbers in the high 50s, maybe low 60s. And then you will have pretty much every member of the House getting behind it. And to me, they have to show courage. And those who were in those districts that were purple districts, they didn't show the courage of conviction. Again, they were concerned with how their political futures would be impacted. And that's where Republicans stand. Because, again, as Flake said this weekend, if it was a private vote, there would be at least 35 Republican senators.
And there's so many things wrong with that statement, right, that illustrates the point you're making around you uphold the Constitution to do your duty, right? So for Flake to come out and say, if there's a private vote, over 30 of them Republicans.
And that's former Arizona Senator Flake.
Right, but here it is, right? Why would it be a private vote, right? If they upheld, what they took their oath to do, they wouldn't be a private vote. They should do it publicly. And then along those lines, watching Joseph McGuire, so he's the interim. He took over for Dan Coates as national security acting. And so, he's a career military person. And I thought, he stood up there and talked about how his love for the country and how he believed there was some credibility to this whistleblower and why he felt the need to do it. But he also felt that there was an unprecedented situation because they've never came across a whistleblowing case where it involved the president and the executive branch. And so where do you have the line between executive privilege and going through it? And so I sort of get his rationale.
Yeah, but you can't go directly to the White House and say to the White House because they're the ones who have committed the acts.
I get that, right? But I get a military man doing it. So to me, I give him a bit of a pass. The ones I can't give a pass to is Mattis when he was there, McMaster when he was there, John Kelly when he was there, because these were military people as well. And the Ukrainian conversation is not the first time he's had conversations like that. They have been they locked stuff up in this vault prior to the Ukrainian conversations right after his conversations with the Mexican president down in Australia, with the Koreans and Saudi Arabia. And so all these conversations where he says the wrong things and that people in his administration were leaking out, that's when they decided we need to save him politically. So put these conversations under lock. And that happened underneath these military men who said they believe in the country, but they showed no backbone to do the right thing out there. And for them to claim that they were the adults in the room, allowing them to get away with doing whatever he wanted.
Can't give McGuire a pass. You can't give McGuire a pass. He served this country admirably. He has a sterling military career. We certainly appreciate and respect and honor his service. But yet, he knew that Barr and Trump and so many high-level White House officials were involved and named. So you can't waver. You have to move forward. And as a military, I don't think he would take that same approach if it came to something that involved a serious national security crisis issue on the battlefield.
Right.
And so I don't think he would apply that same philosophy. And so again, while I do have the highest level of respect for him, you can't give him a pass or anyone a pass on this issue.
This underscores, in every situation you have positives and negatives. In appointments of military personnel, of course, there are certain positives, but there are also negatives. And one of the negatives is loyalty and respect for hierarchy. And in the political world, that can be a negative.
Yep.
In the military is by its nature hierarchical. Because when orders are given on the battlefield, they are matters of life and death, and they must be carried out. If you got problems, you discuss them afterwards. But the political world doesn't function like that. And government inherently is corrupt. I don't care. This is me speaking now. I don't care what style government you're talking about. Government is inherently corrupt. Government lies. It lies to its people. You know, it tells the truth sometimes too. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that in government, in the political world, you have to question authority. And there are times when you have to disagree with authority. And people who are in the military, that is antithetical
I was just gonna say,
to
yeah.
how they function. And this is why it's so difficult for many of them to function the way they're supposed to function in the political world. And that's why a lot of guys would rather get out, because it's too much of an internal conflict for them.
Let me ask you this question, you know, and I'm just a little confused. How did we get here? And the reason why I listen to you talk about the military folks, you talk about political savvy, you talk about people that are politicians that have been politicians for pretty much their life. How has someone like Trump come in?
We got here because the country is divided. This country is divided the way it was divided prior to the Civil War. You got one half of the country that wants to go in another direction, which is a direction toward a more inclusive democracy, and you got a other half of the country that wants to go backwards to the period before civil rights, before women's rights, when unions were illegal, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, because of an anachronistic institution called the Electoral College, the popular will of the majority of people was subverted, and that's how Trump got in office. But this didn't begin with Trump. This goes back half a century, you know, or maybe even longer than that.
Yeah, but I think it's even worse than that. I think that it's the arrogance of his leadership. He thinks that he has certain rights and obligations, notwithstanding what the American public wants. So I think Trump is arrogant enough to think that he can say anything, do anything, without any reprisals being taken.
Yeah, and,
Bob
and
Pickett,
there's
I
a
just
lot
wanna
of.
say, just want to say this real quick. That's not what I'm saying. Is how did a person who's not a politician, he's not the smartest cookie in the room.
Well, that's what I was
How
about
did-
to
yeah,
say to you.
How does
So
he
there's-
come in and
'Cause
get
he
everybody
didn't-
to fall in
but the
order
thing
like
is,
this?
it's not. There's a lot of people who made this happen. It's not. Trump didn't just come out of a vacuum. Let's remember, Roger Stone has been trying to get him to run for president since the 80s. This is all calculated. It's very strategic. It's planned out. It's thought out. And the Republicans, I'm tired of people giving so many Republicans a pass, saying, "Oh, they're just scared of him and they don't know what to do." Let's not get it twisted. They're getting so much done that they have wanted for years and years. All the judicial appointments, all, you know, the cuts to so many programs, things that they've wanted to happen, even the tax cuts, all of that, the Supreme Court nominations, they're getting because he's in office. So he is a vessel for them to get whatever they want done as well, too. So they're not innocent players in this. Many of them are not. And there are a lot of people who are protecting him because of that reason as well, too.
Now, as you've often said, the Democrats intellectualized the last 2016, and as Democrats normally do, which is fine, because you want people to focus on policies, focus on the substance of issues. Trump understood it wasn't about the substance of the issues. He tapped into the visceral and the emotional feelings of those in this country who truly do feel disenfranchised, who truly feel that, you know, black and brown people and immigrants and those who are not, I think, part of this so-called Judeo-Christian foundation of this country, even though this country was built on various foundations, various religions, you know, various ethnicities and races, there are people who truly believe that this country must remain on the foundation of Judeo-Christian values, and particularly the fear that the population and the demographics are drastically and dramatically shifting, they do feel disenfranchised and their country is being taken away. And he tapped into that, and that is real. And so he was able, as a demagogue, because he doesn't give a damn about these people, has been proven, he doesn't really care about them. This was all about him. But he understood that he could win. And he could establish enough of a base if he continued to tap into that. And it worked. And it continues to work because while people talk about, he's not losing his base per se, he's certainly not expanding it. Now, he is losing a certain demographic, which is women, particularly white women, but he is still focusing on that small plurality of people in this country and could care less about the rest of this nation.
Right, because that small plurality is still millions of people.
Yes.
And they're still in very strategic places that are important to the Electoral College.
As Ivory said, the Electoral College, absolutely.
The Democratic Party, I think back to when Senator Obama ran. And he said, yes, we can. And you saw the groundswell in this country. And it seems like we were moving in the direction as the country was getting more browner. And we do know that, as you said, and rightfully so, Nitha, that folks, especially when President Obama became president, that those folks, those minute folks, even though there were millions of folks, they were saying, wait a minute, we can't lose this country here, and we have to strategize here moving forward. My question to you all is, as they were strategizing, did the Democrats go to sleep? And what is the vision of the Democrats? I know we're coming up to the 2020 election, but where are we headed as a country? Because we are divided, as you mentioned, Larry, we are divided, but where are we headed? And is there any vision from the Democratic Party? We know that the Democratic Party represents the opposite of the Trump and the Republican Party, but is that the answer, the way this country should be moving?
We got to go. we have no choice. We're headed. Next year is going to be a year of conflict, but I predict that Trump will be defeated next year.
Yes.
I predict
he's
that.
made,
It's going
he's
to be a
mistakes.
tough fight, but he's going to be defeated next year.
Yes.
And even in defeat, he's going to try to fight back. He'll probably file suit with the Supreme Court to declare the election invalid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Trump is going to be defeated. This conflict, I mean, this goes back to the Civil War.
Right.
The country was divided in the Civil War, and then there was a progressive vision to go forward with the abolition of slavery, and for a minute, as Du Bois said, we moved in the democratic direction, and then we had the counter, what was it called? The post-Reconstruction period, and the reinstitution of slavery, and Jim Crow, and all of that. Then we had another push forward with the civil rights movement and the passage of all the civil rights legislation.
Right.
And then probably, if I was to try to pinpoint a time that actually brought us to where we are now, it was 1968 with the election of Richard Nixon, because Nixon was elected in 68. That's when the Southern strategy came into being. And that's really when you saw the final flip. There was a struggle within the Democratic Party, and essentially the parties finally consolidated, and the Republicans became the party of reaction, and the Democrats, which had been the party of slavery and segregation.
Yes,
I mean, let's
right.
not forget
It
that.
flipped,
Now it had been
right.
the party of slavery. Now they were the party of the civil rights legislation and so on and so forth. So I think since 68, the Republicans have been pushing to turn the clock back and meeting with a whole lot of success. I mean, so much success that they've been able to move beyond just because they had focused primarily on reversing black progress. Now they want to reverse everything. Women's
Exactly.
rights,
Climate.
everything. But I think in their zeal, that's going to be their defeat. They're very in their
I hope
success
you're right, Larry.
are the seeds of their defeat.
I really hope you're right. I don't know, because I'm not saying that unequivocally yet that he's going to lose, because there's so many variables, including who the Democratic nominee is going to be, voter suppression, possibly election interference again. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. That's why I'm like, I really hope you were correct, but I'm not going to.
Yeah,
And Fatin, I just want to make this real quick point, Bobby. Fatin, you said the Democrats, what is their strategy? Well, as soon as Obama won in 2008, the Republicans immediately started to implement their strategy and spend hundreds of millions of dollars to take over state legislatures and gerrymander. So while the Electoral College is critical, part of that is because of the gerrymandering and them having a very focused and laser-like strategy to overtake most of the state legislatures in this country, and that was critical.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, right? So since 68, when that shift occurred, you have the majority of Americans who lean towards a democratic philosophy. And as you said, Larry, you have more black and brown when they're born, they immigrate over, that lean to it. So Republicans, to your point, Jay, in 2008 saw that they are truly going to be the minority as time goes on. So they put in place strategies to say, how can I counterbalance it? And I can counterbalance it by getting into key political positions, lifetime appointments. I can change some of the legislations and the laws and try to fortify it. That's why Moscow Mitch did what he did, right? Which is, whoa, I can't afford to lose this opportunity with the Supreme Court with Merrick Garland. Let me delay it. Let me delay it. Let me delay it. And then he was able to get two in, and you know, more health and prosperity to them. But I hope between now and then, no one leaves the Supreme Court right now, because that'll give them some more time to set it up even further out there. So it's to your point, I don't know. I think the Democrats, quite honestly, I believe they just got comfortable, right? We're the majority. We got this charismatic leader. We can push our agenda. But they really didn't do anything. And you saw that play out as to why one of the reasons Hillary lost, right? So I get it, you know, the servers and all of that, lock her up and all that nonsense. But by her husband's own admission, she did not go after certain parts of this country the way she should have. Right. And so if she had an honest moment, she's sitting back, she's probably saying, I would do that differently. I would have gone after some of those states. So I think there's been when you have success, one of the biggest downfalls to success is having success, because you get complacent.
Complacency,
and I believe that they got complacent. And now, because they don't fight as dirty as Republicans, they're now trying to figure it out how to get their teeth into things.
Or as I always say, they bring a pontificating thought to a knife fight.
Yeah, but you know, even this approach with Pelosi, right? She recognizes that, and I think she believes she's not going. He will not be impeached out of office, and I don't believe that's her end game, right? I believe her end game right now is, let me get as much of a light on all his immoral actions, his character, in a way that grabs the attention of the majority of the voting public in these electoral places, that says, do you want 4 more years of someone who would sell out the country, who doesn't think about your child's safety from gun referring? There was a story that broke this week that he's meeting with the NRA to try to do, well, hey, if you give me support, I won't do something. Another example of this quid pro quo that it didn't get a lot of attention. It like hit it for like a day and then it moved on. So he's trying to garner favors to secure his seat in there. And I believe her play is, let me shine a light on every corner so that everybody knows he does not have the country's best interests at heart. He only has his own interests at heart.
And the Democrats need to focus.
I hear you very clear, and I think your analysis is reasonably a good one. However, I think that Trump, just by being the very person that he is turning off a lot of people, a lot of voters. Voters are now beginning to see very clearly who this gentleman is. He's irrational, he's erratic, and I don't want to trust him to make quality decisions on behalf of my family and the rest of the
But
country.
Bob Pickett, let me ask you this. You just said that he's turning off voters. What voters?
I think he's turning off all the voters, Republican voters as well.
So if
I think
he's-
that people are seeing him as being irrational and just being a person who you can't trust.
My question is, if he's turning off Republican voters, then wouldn't it make sense for just speaking for the other side? Wouldn't it make sense for other candidates to be in the race? Wouldn't it make sense for that? If he's turning off the voters, wouldn't it make sense for other Republicans
But
to be in the race?
there are two.
Of course,
other-
they're in the
there's
race,
two.
but now the Trump and they're shutting down a couple of places
Yeah,
for the
the-
primary,
right,
so they can't
right.
run. But
Some states
now
are not going to
with-
have a primary.
Right.
Right, but now with this coming in here, with this whole impeachment, does the Republican Party, in a sense, with the momentum that they feel that they have now, they have to say this party is bigger than Trump. So do we go and get caught with our pants down, or do we put pressure and say, you know what, we need to make sure that we have a candidate out here, a viable candidate? You say no, Larry, why?
No, the die is cast. Trump is their candidate.
Okay.
They are too much in with Trump. Too many of them came into office on his coattails.
Right.
He came to districts. He just went to North Carolina,
North Carolina.
Yeah.
to get this guy elected.
Yeah. And it was very
narrow.
close.
It was
very close.
even
very
though
close.
Trump was in there.
The 9th district in North Carolina, very close.
But many of them owe their office to Trump, and secondarily, this group of Republicans, they are in line ideologically with Trump. They are in line with him, and so the die is cast. The Republicans are with Trump to the end of this, and the Democrats have to work their way through the primary, come up with a candidate, and then fight it out the last 3 months until November.
Can the Democrats become like the Republicans, be narrow, razor sharp? Can they come together? And that's another. I'm really jumping ahead because I want to say that this impeachment. Some are saying that this impeachment may hurt some of the Democratic candidates.
It may hurt Biden.
Yeah. Well, they're saying that the top contenders will be okay in the sense of getting the news coverage.
I don't
But
know.
some of your second tier may not get the news coverage because of
Well, the second tier is going to be out.
That's what they're saying.
Right.
They
Yes.
coming out. I don't know if they're coming out by March or by April, but they're out.
Right.
Everybody knows it's down to about 5 that will go if all
that,
5
right.
of them go
Right.
to the convention.
Right. Yeah. So, Bob, to your point about he's turning off more voters, I would say he's turning off more enlightened voters. True, but you got to remember there's still a large number of people who are eligible to vote who are apathetic to what is going on. I was watching some newscasts in New York City, and they're interviewing people on the street, asking them about the impeachment. And there are some that said, I've been too busy. I've seen a headline. I'm not following. I don't know what's going on, other than, they should let the man do his job. Let the man do his job. So let's understand doing his job. He has inappropriate conversations with other country heads. So you're saying leave him alone to allow him to do more of those things, right? 2 weeks ago, a story came out that he's had 78% turnover in his key positions, 65 positions. Unprecedented. For those who said that he is a great businessman, I argue again, no great business person has that much turnover and can be considered successful.
That's true.
The continuity that you have. So he is not very good at what he's doing, and it's not because, as he claims, there's presidential harassment. He just doesn't know what he's doing.
But I
But
think
Bobby,
you said it.
but that's my point, though. My point is, I think that there's a large segment of the American public that sees that very clearly. He's erratic. He can't make quality decisions, and that he, in every regard, is posing us with some sort of danger. And I think the American public now is beginning to see that and make an assessment
But
against that.
his supporters, like that, whatever percentage it is, that aren't going anywhere, they will never see that. They will 35%, whatever the number is now. They're never going to disagree with that. They're like a cult following, and they believe everything that he says. They believe everything that Fox News
Absolutely.
says, that right wing radio puts out, right wing publications. They
I
believe
don't know.
that talking point, and they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And if you look,
Yes.
even just during this time, Trump tweeted, I think it was like 100 times or something about all of this, like, oh, they're going after your president, and this is all a witch hunt. They're going after your president. They want me out of office, and they truly do believe and side with that, and they're not going to disagree.
It is a cult of persona, and I
And
think
if you listen to some of his words, right, it just shows you how just weird this is. He actually came out this week in his tweet and said he created the economy. The successful economy of the United States is I created the economy in
and
the
he
U.S.
says I inherited a mess.
Right.
Exactly. And to speak to that point, Bobby, it is a cult of personality, Bob. But to speak to the point you made earlier, right now the Democrats have to capitalize on what's taking place with General Motors. They need to capitalize on Trump promising to revive the coal industry, which any person who has any knowledge of the shifts in this country economically and from an energy standpoint knew that wasn't going to happen. They need to focus on his promise to revive manufacturing in Wisconsin, and we've seen what happened there. So we're talking Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, 3 states that Hillary could have won. And as Bobby said, if they had to listen to Bill Clinton and gone in and got on the ground and put boots on the ground and really campaigned in those states and really spoke directly to those people, those numbers 10, 20,000 votes would have made all the difference in each of those states. And again, right now, he keeps trumpeting the economy, but yet we see what's taking place with the economy, how gradually you do not see the trend as it is trending upward anymore. And the manufacturing jobs, which that's really who he focused on, and what he focused on, those who were losing those manufacturing jobs, those jobs aren't coming back. He hasn't created any more of those jobs. And so that's what the Dems really need to focus on. And again, while the impeachment, we know that has to be right now something that the entire country has to be made aware of. And keep it simple. Keep it simple. Don't try to, don't let him muddy the message. The man, as Bobby just said, he tried to leverage, the office for his own personal gain, putting the national security at stake of this country.
That's simply all they have to say.
Simple. That's all they simply have to say. And let me make this point. They keep talking about the working class in this country. Well, majority of the working class in this country are black women. If we really look at the demographics and the way it is really determined, the working class. And so I don't think the Dems are speaking enough to working class women, women of color, period, in this country. And at the end of the day, those are the women that could push this party over the top and sweep him right out of office.
Right. Let me just. I want to kind of switch gears now because I know some of you gotta take off.
I'm sorry.
Shortly.
Just one last thing. The last thing on this impeachment, right? So Giuliani's his personal lawyer, which is an issue, right? So why would you have your personal lawyer involved in state and country issues?
May be illegal.
It's very illegal, right? But the other, because the Republicans and Trump are distorting this, right? So the question around Biden's son Holden. Right, so Hunter. So Hunter, he sat on the board of this company that was investigated, and no corruption was found in that company. They finished the investigation, and then he joined the board. Now, the question that I still have is, what did he do as a board member on there, where he walked away with $50,000 up to a month, right? So 600,000. So the question to me is, what were the obligations as a board member in this Ukraine on this energy company? But be clear, they were not being investigated because the investigation had finished, and the investigation was finished by the prosecutors who are no longer there.
Right.
A new prosecutor came in, looked at it again, and said there was nothing for that. They saw no evidence or anything. So they've been cleared twice, the company in the Ukraine. So when the Trump supporters come out and say something bad is going on. There's no proof of that, and they're going to continue to try to muddy those waters.
Right. The truth has never been a stumbling block.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Right.
And I'm telling you, with this particular issue, Biden, that knife is going to cut both ways.
Yes.
Although no corruption was found, Trump is going to use that as a propaganda point.
Yeah, exactly.
Corrupt.
Yeah.
They've even gone back and now have gotten the State Department to reopen the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails.
Yeah.
You know, and so they're going to use everything, like you said, everything, including the kitchen sink,
Yeah.
true or not. They're going to use that in their propaganda.
Trump-
Well,
we
that has
got
always said
to
the
move
messaging.
on. We got to
And
move
Trump will
on.
throw
We got-
anybody under the bus
Yeah.
too. Let's
We
remember
gotta-
that too.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So
Even
we're gonna.
Pence.
Even Pence.
Yes.
Look how he said about
Yeah.
we should look into Pence calls. We should get those
Yeah.
transcripts too. Read those as well. I was like,
One of the things that, of course, we know that the candidates, the Democratic candidates, are out there, and they're vying for votes and things like that. Something happened the other day. It was interesting. First of all, I came up across an article. Bobby, you wasn't here last Sunday. It was a New York Times article, and the New York Times article, front page article, stating that young African voters were approaching their parents and saying, "Quit Biden, we're bored." And the article goes on to say,
what did it say? Sorry, say it again.
Quit, Q-U-I-T, quit Biden, we are bored. And basically you're saying the young folks are not motivated by Biden. And if you want us to get motivated here, then Biden is not, if you're going to stick with Biden, then you may lose us as voters. So me and Reverend Sharpton was talking last week. So I said, Rev, majority of Reverend Sharpton audience are older audience, but it's across the country. So we could get a temperature. So he said, I'm going to put a question out there. And the question was, who would you vote for today? You can change it next week. You can change it in 2 weeks. But who would you vote for today, and pretty much why? Let me tell you what the statistics were. Very interesting. It came down to 15 votes for Joe Biden, Harris and Warren 2, Gabbard 1, and Trump 1. Nothing for Bernie. And Warren 2.
Two.
Wow.
So as I'm listening,
So this is a total of how many people? 20 people?
there's about 20, 22
Yeah.
people.
Yeah,
About
that's
22
not
people.
a-
Now, it's interesting.
Small
It's
sample
a small
size.
sample.
Small sample
It's a
size,
small
yeah.
sample.
But also, what you said, they're older.
They
Like,
tend to be
his
older.
listeners
So
tend
I'm
to be
sitting
older.
here. So I text Reverend Sharpton. I said, and I'm just listening to the older folks, and I'm listening and I'm saying, okay, they're voters out there. They're a voting bloc. And I'm saying, are we headed for a mess? Are we headed really for a mess here? Because I see the divide. I see this divide.
I've been saying it forever.
That this is a bigger mess than I think we really, as Democrats,
not to worry.
What?
Not to worry.
I don't think so.
And this is
I
why.
think
And
that-
this is why I make this controversial statement.
Yeah.
Because for good or for ill, whoever the Democratic Party candidate, whoever the nominee is that comes out of the convention, black people are going to support that person.
Right. I believe they'll rally around it. I
Now,
agree.
young
I
people.
believe, I
though.
believe black people,
Young
but
people.
black people. But the question is, okay, fine, we vote 90%. The bottom line, will we win? And the electability, that becomes a question. The electability of whoever comes
Well,
out.
Or
here's-
like Jamie
we
said,
will
will
win.
young people.
right. Here's
Yeah.
Will young
We
people
will
come
win.
out?
Yeah, one of the things that Jamie talked about when he was talking about Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, right? One of the things that continues to happen, right, particularly in Pennsylvania, there's been a migration from the more urban areas to some of the more suburban areas of Pennsylvania in particular, right, where there are more now black and brown folks in there. They're younger. And I do believe, to Larry's point, once we figure out who's going to represent the Democratic Party, then they will rally together and say, well, and those who don't get the nominees, that the younger folks would say, yeah, I'm behind Kamala, I'm behind Warren, whoever it is. Those candidates will say, we need to unite. And if you supported me then, you should support me now and place your vote for so-and-so.
But that's what Bernie said.
I was getting ready to say that. Bernie said that, and it didn't happen.
But this is a different
It
time.
didn't
This is a
happen.
different time.
But here's the difference.
Different time and different circumstances.
Here's the difference. Hillary, as we said, did not go to some of those places, right?
yeah.
And what I'm saying now is that in some of those places, there has been a migration where there are more black and brown in there, where I do believe that they will say, hey, that's going to change the electoral mix a bit, right? Because remember, she won the popular vote by a landslide. She lost the electoral, and she did not go to some of these states where the electoral vote mattered. And I'm saying there's a different representation in some of those electoral states now, even with the gerrymandering, that whoever the candidate is has to appeal to. And I believe if the candidates who don't win do what Bernie did and say, combine your support, it will make a difference.
And Brother Fatine, I agree with
right.
Larry, but I do think that the ticket is going to be critical. The last election, it was Hillary. Kane, he was there.
Yeah.
He was
I
there.
even remember.
He was there.
Tim
He was
Kaine.
there.
Yeah.
But Tim Kaine was there. And obviously he didn't inspire and motivate anyone. The ticket is going to be critical. And let's just say if right now Biden does go on to win, I continue to say, and I've said it here many, many times, my candidate beyond any other candidate, Stacey Abrams. I just think she is dynamic.
But she's not even
I
running.
think she's not
But
running.
she said she will accept the
She
VP.
will accept
Yes,
the
she
VP.
said
She
that.
will, and
So
she.
if that's the ticket,
And
yeah.
Stacey Abrams is someone who will galvanize and get out young voters. She is dynamic. She is someone who she speaks
Will
to
she
young
get out
people.
the white
and
voters?
I think she will.
Yeah.
I think she will. I think
that would
because
work.
what she did
Yeah.
in Georgia, I think she to me has proven, and it's still, again, it's still yet to be proven, but I think she has shown that she can get out and inspire and motivate black voters and attract white voters at a level that many other candidates and other people that may be part of that ticket cannot. And if in a state like Georgia, if she can make a gubernatorial race in Georgia, a black woman that close, I think Stacey Abrams, again, giving her broad appeal, I think she can attract a national audience, and I think she can galvanize and motivate young people.
I think that would be a
Interesting.
really powerful ticket. Or if it ends up not being her, if it's like Biden and Warren, that could also work too. Because that way you still get the progressive base, you still get younger people. And she actually has moved up in the polls. She's #1 right now.
Yeah, but what about
she even surpassed
Biden's,
Biden?
What about Biden's age at that point?
I don't
think that's a factor.
I don't know
That's-
that the age is the question. The bigger question is, will Biden be the nominee?
Yeah.
I think it's up for grabs.
I think right now, I'm
How
saying
old-
right now,
how old
Warren
will
is
he
the
be?
leading candidate right now.
How old will he be at
I
that
don't think
point?
it's the age. I think Biden is. I think the nomination is up for grabs.
totally
I think
is. Yep.
that Biden's margin of victory in the primaries is going to get smaller and smaller.
I agree with you,
Warren
Larry.
is
Agreed.
I
already
agree.
outpolling
Yep.
Biden in certain
Yeah, that's what I'm
states
saying.
I agree.
now.
I agree.
She's
And
ahead
we-
of him.
And we
Yeah.
haven't even gotten to Iowa yet.
Right.
I think
And her
that,
ground game is tremendous.
But
and
tremendous.
I think that we're headed toward a brokered convention, and I don't necessarily relish that point, but the pie, the slices are going to be too evenly cut. I personally think the nomination is going to come down to Biden, Warren, and Sanders.
And I think it's optics. I think it's energy. I think when you see Bernie and you see Elizabeth Warren, they exude energy.
Yeah.
They really do. Biden does not.
I'm
And
gonna-
I think for young people, they want to see that energy.
Exactly.
I'm gonna
It
say
has to
something
be-
that y'all are
well-
just gonna throw eggs at me, but I see something that. Go ahead and throw eggs at me, and if I'm wrong, I've been wrong before, right, Bobby, on basketball.
Please say that
I've been
again.
wrong,
I've been
but
wrong before?
I'm going with Corey. I'm thinking that Corey's
Corey.
going to come back in this race.
Booker?
Cory Booker is going to come back in this race. Remember, if you go back to Obama, Obama was not leading the candidate at first. I know you're looking like that, But I just feel that it's something about Cory Booker.
Your microphone.
You know,
People want
Hey,
to.
people
People
can't
want to
hear
hear
what
what
you
you
have
have
to
to
say.
say.
I think there's something about throwing the eggs. I just think that there's something about Cory Booker that he's for me.
Now, can you
He-
be more
for-
definitive? You said he'll get back in the race. Are you saying that he will win?
I feel that he's going to. I don't think Cory Booker will win, but I think he's going to play a much more major role in the race. I know you're looking at me there,
Well, it
and
speaks
I'm
to
gonna
what
tell you
Larry
why.
said, but it
Now I'm
speaks
gonna
to
go
what
to
Larry
that. Now wait, let me go to Larry right now. Now Larry, I'm not picking on you on this but this is what I'm hearing about your candidate. We know where you at. And I know you take daggers for your guy, and fine, I respect that because you're consistent.
Possessive.
Yeah,
You're
no,
okay.
but your candidate,
T, you got to get closer with Larry's face.
you gotta see his face. You gotta see his face.
You got Larry's face.
Larry's face.
But for me, as a voter, and just
That
the
could be a
young
meme.
folks watching the debate,
Could be a meme.
just watching my daughters that are not very political savvy, but just watching, they seem to be a little bit more motivated on some of the things that Cory Booker was saying. Your candidate.
Particularly what though? Particularly what issues?
Um,
No, particularly what issues? No,
I
is it
think your
is it criminal
polling
justice
needs
reform?
to be raised.
Because he's making
I'm talking about.
No, he
I'm
is
going
on
there.
that, but,
he,
yeah.
he talked about guns. He talked about racism. He talked about institutional racism, and he doesn't seem like he's doing it. He's doing it from an experience point of view. He's not doing it as the white candidate that this is the right thing to talk about. He's talking about those issues, guns. Everybody's talking about.
As someone who's
these
lived
issues.
in Larry's city, is that what you're
Right.
saying?
Yeah,
In Newark.
exactly. And I wasn't a fan of Cory Booker, and Pickett knows because I was like, throw him out of here
See, but the
when he
thing
was
is,
running
but
here. But I just want to
I
say,
hear what you're saying, but like, there's still something. There's something
OpenLine show.
about Booker that just does not resonate with people, and I think even Castro has more of a rapport with the voting public than Booker does. Like, there's many more people.
and what are their
who are
percentages?
even-
Their percentages
It's the
are
same. Like, they're
basically the same.
same
They're
as
the same.
Corey's.
Yeah, it's the same as Corey.
That's what I know.
It's the
I
same.
know.
That's what I'm saying. So if you're gonna pick like out of any of them,
I'm just telling you what.
You know.
Listen, I'm telling you what my heart feels. I'm not sitting up here. It's easy for me to say. It's easy to say Warren. It's easy to say Bernie. It's easy to say that.
So one of our viewers.
Oh, here we go.
Michael Dwyer. Love you for team.
Yep.
But I don't have high hopes for Booker. Maybe in someone's administration.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I see
can
him.
see that,
I
yeah.
see
Here's
him.
another
Yes.
one. Here's
Okay.
another one. Black Thought. Corey never connected with the masses of black people.
He didn't.
See,
he didn't.
Yeah.
But
Exactly. He
something has
doesn't-
changed in Corey since he became a senator. If you watch him in the Judiciary Committee, how he has challenged folks, he has, to me, a person can change. And if a person can change, I can say, you know what? I can look at their record and say, before, nah, man, you wasn't there.
Wait. Here's another
Yeah,
one. for you.
okay, here we go.
Edward Latson. You always got pearls, Edward. Cory Booker. Even Rosario Dawson doesn't want to be.
See, we're not throwing the
That's a good
eggs.
one.
Right.
The viewers are
I
throwing
got,
the eggs.
and I said that, and that's fine. That's fine. Time will tell. We'll see. I just had to say that
Right.
because I have to be on record. Because if it starts to happen, I'm just
seems
gonna
like
sit
it
back like
happens.
this.
No, let's go
It's a
back. After that,
miracle.
let's go back. So your daughters, are they supporting him? Is he their
My
top
daughter-
candidate? Is he the candidate they would vote for or are going to vote
My-
for the primaries?
My daughters just was watching the last debate, and they said, which some folks said that Cory Booker won that debate, and they were impressed
a lot of people
with
did,
Cory
yeah.
Booker. They were just
Right.
impressed to watch the first debate that they watched, 27 and 23, not really political savvy, but just watching the debate and talking about issues. They liked the presentation that Cory Booker presented to them.
Got it. All right.
Well, there's a Rubicon that I had to cross.
Because they leprechaun.
Gotta give it to Edward Latson. Gotta give it to Edward Latson. That was good.
He always has great.
Go ahead, brother Edward.
There's a Rubicon I had to cross a long time ago. And that was, do I support a person primarily because they're black? And I know there are a lot of people who want to support. I mean, black people have a sense of solidarity. We have racial solidarity because we have a shared common experience. And we also are the victims of an apartheid political structure. So we have a right to self-determination, and we want to see black people certainly in offices over municipalities, counties, states, and the country where the majority of the population is black. But somewhere, I don't know, maybe because I'm 65 now. So if I say 20 years ago, I'm 45, I'm still, even then, middle-aged. I came to a point where I had to grasp the fact that skin color alone is not enough to support a person.
I agree.
You know, a lot of people, a lot of African Americans want to support Corey and they want to support Kamala because they're African Americans. But at a certain point, I had to move beyond, not move away from, not exclude skin color, because I always have a sense of solidarity for my people and for those who truly represent my people. But at the same time, I have to look at a person's program, their policies, their political program, and their record.
Larry.
Now, Cory Booker.
Larry, I want to say one thing. You made a good point. I'll let you continue. That's interesting, and I agree with you. Elizabeth Warren surged in support from black voters, proves she's not to be underestimated, okay? In July, Biden had 53% of the black vote. Warren had 4%. August, Biden had 47%. Warren had 8%. Now, Biden has 40%. Warren is at 20%. So go ahead and continue because you was good. But I'm just showing you. I'm just showing you that they are looking at Warren. Right now, Warren is surging. She's surging not only with black voters. She's surging with all voters across. Right now, she's surging across the board. With all voters. But go ahead. I cut you.
And you making the point I'm making. Obviously, a lot of black people are looking beyond simply the race of the candidate, and they're looking to the program. And I think that exemplifies my point. And that's one of the reasons I support Bernie Sanders, because historically his program is one that will benefit working and poor people in this country. And he's been the leader. When they had the first debate, the Wall Street Journal came out and said, who's the real winner of this debate? Bernie Sanders. Why? Because the party is following him.
Co-opted his policies.
Following his ideas. And you know, this is not unusual because
historically, why is he not resonating like he did?
I think one reason is because of race. I think there are a lot of black people who are still voting for black candidates, and I think
it's also Warren too.
Black candidates, but they don't. The black candidates don't have the support of the black candidates.
But I think it's also Warren too, because it's like you just said, a lot of people have taken, and Warren and Sanders are very similar in a lot of their stances on issues, and I think people just want maybe something different. They want something different from 2016, something newer, like a different vessel to deliver that. And a lot of people weren't as familiar with Warren, and it's funny, Fatine, how you're saying about Booker. I said this about Warren ages ago, that I think she was going to be the one, and people looked at me like I was crazy, and I'm like, yeah, but if you watch her ground game, what she's been doing, and how she's resonating with the public, this is why she's gone up so much. But her and Bernie, are very similar on a lot of issues. I will say that, and I think that's why you're not seeing as much. Like, Bernie supporters are still there. Of course, they're diehard, as we know, right, Larry? They are diehard. They're not going anywhere. But I think some of the folks who may have supported him have now moved to Warren.
And I think Warren has fearlessly challenged systems that people think have not served them. I think a lot of people look at Wall Street, and, she clearly is going after Wall Street. And I think a lot of people have said, listen, Wall Street has not served our best interests, although they haven't really dug deeply into, what has Wall Street done to impact or affect us? What they see is wealthy people, they're looking at the income gap. Wall Street represents, the massive income gap in this country. So I think she has really challenged those systems. And to your point, Larry, I have voted over many white candidates over black candidates because those black candidates has not represented the masses, represented my best interest. And my best interest is the interest of people who are also white, people who are working class, again, poor people. So, while, I do agree, race is an issue. And I think with Biden, because of his ties to Obama, race is a factor because the older black voters feel comfortable with him because they're always going to make the connection with Barack Obama and Joe Biden. But again, these are Bernie's policies for the most part.
Right.
These are Bernie's policies for the most part. And I agree with Larry. I think that you're absolutely right. I think how Elizabeth Warren has framed them, who she really has targeted as far as you're the ones being impacted by these policies. You're the one being impacted by not being able to pay your student loans, by not being able to get an affordable job, having to work 2 and 3 jobs. So I think she's framed it in a different manner. But at the end of the day, these are, for the most part, Bernie's policies.
So to illustrate your point, DB4A, thanks again for tuning in. But Warren is a far better messenger of the Sanders message.
Yeah.
Bernie comes across as an angry old white man. Warren is more persuasive and energetic in delivering the message.
Well, he is angry. He has a reason to be.
But let me say this. Yes, he is angry.
That is true.
I mean,
That's true, too.
there are a lot of people. There are people in this country are angry. Just like Trump. The reason
But it's hurting him now. It's hurting him
and the
now.
reason Trump was able to attract and again galvanize his base because his base was angry.
Yeah, but he's hurting him now because Warren is in there. Now.
And the media is hurting him.
Right.
There's a media bias against Bernie Sanders. It's clear. Any show you go to, and particularly those that pass themselves off as liberal, like MSNBC.
Yeah.
I actually saw them, and I think we actually had this graphic up a couple of weeks ago where they were reading the percentages in the latest poll. Bernie was second, and Warren was like third, and they made Warren higher than Bernie, even though we're looking at the numbers right there. So there's a media bias, and that's not surprising in a country that's controlled by an oligopoly that Bernie has been railing against for his entire political career.
Professor. We're not giving him brother protest. Next week he will be professor.
Exactly.
No.
And remember this. After the first debate, Brother Fatim, I will now, and I'm gonna throw the egg at you, brother. I love you dearly.
Here we go. Let's go.
But after that first debate, MSNBC was gaga over Kamala Harris.
Right.
And so were you. And I said,
That's right.
And I
So
said,
was
listen,
so was a lot of people in the country.
A lot of people were. I just messaged you, brother. A lot of people were.
But after Gabbard
But
saw a new backside.
I sat in the same seat and said, listen, man, I watched the debate, with my mom, with the older voter.
Right.
She wasn't moved. And my mom should be the first one to support a black woman. And listen, she loves Kamala. Right. She really does. But she wasn't moved by the performance. And as I said, it was a performance. She made sure she had her lines that she was going to get in. Yeah. And I said, she's not going to move the needle. She'll have a bump, but it will level off. And it did. So now MSNBC, they're off her bandwagon.
Yeah. Well,
and
Tulsi shut her down in the next debate.
She did. Yeah. She gave her what she gave Biden. But now MSNBC,
it's back. Tulsi is coming back.
She is, but now MSNBC is Warren.
That's
right, exactly.
So it shifts. It's cyclical.
Well, let me do this because I know time is short. And some of the young folks that are sitting there with their parents watching us talk out here, they're probably saying, "Okay, all right, Mike."
We actually did get one of those in there.
Yeah.
So there was a comment around that. Someone actually, Fatim.
I know.
Yeah, she says, this is Francesca. Where
Francesca.
And it's Francesca. My husband and I do this for a living, and Biden, Harris, and Booker are not connecting with younger voters.
Exactly.
45 and younger have moved on.
Wow. See, and you know what?
Agreed.
And we're going to have that discussion with them. That's what we talk at them, but we need to talk with them. We need to talk with them. And thank you, Francesca, for making that point. And that's the conversation that we're going to start having because we tend to leave them out.
Yes.
Yep. But there's
They're
a
always
sto-
left out.
Right. There's a story out there that on my production team on the Open Line on air show, they kept adding to the rundown. And I was saying, right now the top story is impeachment. But see, that's what I'm saying. If you don't listen to the younger folks, it's certain things that they want to talk about. Not that impeachment is not important, but they have other things that they feel is important or they want to talk about. And social media, now see, they don't have to, again, social media is out here and that's what's happening. So there's a story that they brought to me, and even our technical guy said, let's see if he has the graphic for us on this one.
Bring it up,
Get
Tazo.
ready.
Bring it up,
But
Tazo.
this one is dealing with, and I want to bring up the correct information here, is dealing with where these white students cut off the black girl's dreads in Virginia. And this is a 12-year-old African-American girl named Amari Allen accused 3 white classmates of pinning her down and cutting off her dreadlocks with scissors at the Emmanuel Christian School, where the United States Vice President's wife teaches.
She's a part-time art teacher there.
Yes.
Karen Pence, and
Yes.
she used to teach there years ago. She stopped for a period, and she just came back this year. And one of the reasons she decided to come back is because this Christian school has edicts on and guidelines that say that no staff member could participate in LGBTQ, homosexual. That is against their school policy. So she wanted to be associated with this school because they followed the values that she believes in. And so those values include 3 young white boys jumping on this young 12-year-old girl and saying, "You look ugly, so therefore we're going to cut
That's
off
what
your
they said.
dreadlocks."
Well, let me go verbatim here. So Mary Allen says the assault happened during break time at her private school, in which the school is in Springfield, Virginia. This happened last Monday. She alleges that the boys, she alleges that the boys held her down on a slide and called her hair, as Bobby stated, ugly and nappy, and cut some off. The school and local police both confirmed they were investigating the incident. The boys came up to me and they ambushed me, sort of, like caged me in. And so they put their hands over my mouth.
Wow.
They put my hands behind my back and they started cutting my hair and told me that I was ugly. They took my lunch and ate it in front of me and told me
my
I
God.
didn't deserve it, that I could just starve and stuff like that. This is what the young
This
young
is
Was at a
lady.
Christian school?
This
Christian
is what the
school.
young lady said
This the
happened
allegation.
at the school, and now they, and I understand they have to do an investigation. Let this have been 2 white kids, and
That's an assault.
yes,
That
exactly,
is an assault.
assault. And these kids should be. You talk about the 6 years old that were
They
arrested,
put in handcuffs.
handcuffed
They put
and
the six-
arrested. They
put the
put in the back
6-year-old
on
handcuffs.
fingerprinted. One was fingerprinted.
Exactly.
Fingerprinted. Well, they fired that police officer. But these kids here, or 12, 13 years old, they need to be arrested. Yes.
Absolutely.
And this poor girl is
But
going to
they
be
haven't.
traumatized.
They have not been
Not yet.
arrested.
That is
No.
trauma.
The investigation is going on, and again, in this heightened school security, I like to understand where the school monitors were, where the school safety folks are. For this child to allegedly be held down and have her hair cut, that's not a quick act.
Right.
So there has to be some folks who had to have witnessed as other students or teachers or adults and everything. So we'll see how the investigation turns out. I hope, and this is just a bad thing to say, I hope there's some truth to this and not a made-up story, because we have had stories where
That's true. We
people
should
have
say allegedly.
Well, that's what I
right.
said.
Allegedly.
That's why
So-
I
Sorry,
said.
that's
That's why
why
I
I
cut
say
Bobby off,
allegedly.
because I
He
wanted
did
to read it.
Right.
But brother protest, if we come to find out, if we come to find out, and if you go down, I'm with you.
All
I'm
right.
rolling with you.
All right.
I'm rolling with you. So because we got to stand up for our young folks. We got to stand up for
Exactly.
everybody that
You know?
But this one, I want to make sure that we stand up for our young, because sometimes our young do not feel that they are protected.
Right.
Yeah.
My hope is that the activists on the ground will take up this cause.
I hope so.
I mean, it's good for us to come and give support from around the country, but you got NAACP in Virginia,
Yes.
you got Urban League in Virginia, you got National Action Network in Virginia,
Right.
and there are probably a host of organizations that are local that we don't know about.
Right.
I hope that they will take up this cause, because this is just like the wrestler
Right.
in Jersey whose
Dreads,
dreads
yeah.
had to be
Got-
cut
yeah.
so he could wrestle
Right.
in the
The
wrestling match.
equipment,
But
right.
this is worse than that.
Yeah.
In that situation, at least I mean, there was no redeeming value of it, but it was a situation. Allegedly, they cut his hair because the rules said you couldn't
Right.
have long hair. This was an assault.
Yes.
This was like somebody jumping you on the street,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
and putting your life in danger.
It's great. Just give me 30 seconds for team, just very quick, because I know we're about to head out.
Yeah, Nida has a story,
Yeah,
too.
there were just three things. As we know, the trial of the cop in Texas who shot the brother, who she said,
Amber Guyton, yeah.
yes, and so you know, she was very emotional on the stand, and she said that she was the one that was dead. And you know, I don't doubt her sincerity, but the law is the law, you know, and I hope that the jurors and during that trial, there is the focus on the law. That was a tragedy. That was a tragic
She
event.
said that she walked in the apartment.
You're talking about Amber Geyer.
Amber
Right.
Amber
Geyer,
Geyer.
yeah.
You're talking about
Yes.
the police officer, as you just
Yes,
stated,
Amber Geyer.
walked in the apartment and didn't know
It
that
was
it wasn't her apartment.
her apartment.
I walked in. I went to Myrtle Beach, and we rented a condo. And I walked in the wrong apartment. Now, remember, I only seen my apartment one day,
Right. Yeah.
and I walked in the wrong apartment. By the time I got in there, oh my God, I'm in the wrong
You
apartment.
said that
And
before,
I
yeah.
heard somebody in the shower. I ran out.
Yeah.
But that's one
You walked into the
day.
wrong
One
apartment.
day.
And the thing about her that I just can't understand. She walked in, he's sitting on the floor eating ice cream, watching television, and her first act was to draw her weapon and shoot him.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as though he was charging her. He didn't throw anything at her. He wasn't threatening her. It's just the fact that she believed he was in her house. She drew her weapon while he's sitting on the floor eating ice cream, watching television, and shot him in the chest.
In a non-threatening, you know, posture. Secondly, you might have said this, but I certainly want to congratulate the brother Jarrell Jerome, Bronx native, winning the Emmy for, you know, Best Actor. And When They See Us, he was
Oh, yes.
phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, he
Now-
was
One of the
really
great
good.
performances, and I said this by not just a actor of color, but any actor in recent memory. Just amazing. So Ava DuVernay and the whole production team and the crew
And
of
the
When They See Us.
exonerated five were there too. And
And
they
the
all stood
exonerated
up
five were
and-
there.
And I
you
get
know,
on Ava
peace.
DuVernay because, you know, and a lot of people, my wife said this to me, and I said, nah, it's okay. But you know what? You need to get the story right. And it was fascinating. But it was fascinating. But, you know, when you give credit, you need to know your homework. You know, because even when I interviewed the exonerated five at the Circle of Sisters, they even said, one of them said that we were in jail, and when I turned on the radio and I heard OpenLine talking about my case,
Yes.
they didn't even know about
Yeah.
OpenLine at that
Yes.
particular time.
Yes.
He was- yeah.
And even in the movie, there was no credit. And
Yeah.
but I said to my wife, don't worry about it. But as I look back, history is important, and
Very.
facts are important.
The open
And
line was the
yes.
driving
That
force.
was
The
Raymond
driving force
Santana.
behind that.
Actually, yeah, he said that to me too. That he's like bobsleighed was the first one I heard
Yes.
fighting and advocating. For
The
us on
driving
radio.
force behind it.
And it's not an incidental point. It's the point that historically black radio and black oriented programs have played in the history of our movement. The black radio stations and the black DJs, even on non-black owned radio stations, played a critical role during the civil rights movement. What would it have taken for them to have in the script mentioned this is an open line, you know, online with Bob Slade and Bob Pickett and,
Yeah.
you know.
Should have
and-
been prominently mentioned, Larry.
I mean,
prominently.
What would
Or
it
have the
have
radio
taken?
on in the background where you just
Would
have
there
Absolutely.
real program
Right.
playing?
Absolutely,
Right.
it should
wouldn't have taken anything.
It should have been prominently mentioned.
Right.
They mentioned, and rightfully so, the Amsterdam News. Because I can quote all the media that was involved, because we all were involved in all
But
those
it was an
cases
open
back
line.
then.
It was an open line that
I
drove.
understand.
It was an open line that drove the black media, the Amsterdam News, and so the open line unequivocally was the driving force
And
behind
what
it.
would it have taken to have had in a scene
Like 2 seconds,
somebody
right.
sitting there and you could visibly
Right.
see they were reading about the case in
Absolutely.
the Amsterdam News.
And last
That's
thing, let me
what
say this,
happened.
Scott.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think this is so important. My prayers, my heart goes out to the family of the police officer that was
Texas.
shot and murdered this morning. No, this morning in the Bronx,
Bronx.
Edenwald Projects. A white police officer shot and murdered by a black suspect who was on probation or parole. Heart goes out to the entire NYPD. I saw some officers on the way here. I stopped and talked to them, sent my condolences. They
That's
truly
why you was
appreciate
late,
it.
but that's okay. We rang the bell for you.
And just part of the story is still unfolding. They do the investigation. It seems like there was a struggle.
Yes.
And it's possible that the police officer was shot with his own weapon as they were struggling, the gun going off in between the two of them, shooting himself 5 times, having himself shot 5 times, potentially by his own gun. in
Absolutely
this
prayers to
struggle.
the entire NYPD.
And parallel to the Amber Geyer case, the officers that killed Stefan Clark are being put back on the force.
Wow, in Sacramento. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
That came out this week.
Right, Bobby, I know you gotta get ready to get on out.
And Jamie.
And so do I.
Well, you,
Gotta
both
go
of you,
cover the
they're
Giants.
really, because I'm
Gotta go
not
cover the
gonna
Giants
end the
today.
show. I'm gonna let you, if there's a sports stories real quick.
Just real quick, why don't you take the Christian Coleman story, and I'll do the other one.
Oh, yes. Christian Coleman, young brother, 23-year-old, just won the World Championships in 100 meters, ran 9.76, which is an amazing time. But Justin
Fastest
Gatlin,
by American.
fastest by an American, but Justin Gatlin at 37 years old, still going strong, finished second.
Yeah. And
37.
and I know
37.
in the past, in the honor of Bob Slade, Bob would talk more about the Yankees and Aaron
Oh,
Judge.
definitely.
But a big shout out to the New York Mets,
That's right.
Alonso, who passed Aaron Judge and having the rookie record
53.
number of home runs as a rookie, 53 last night against the Braves. They
Braves.
beat the Braves
Yeah,
last night.
Braves.
So
We got one more game today, I believe. So
Yes.
that's interesting. I'm gonna let you brothers
Wait,
go.
no, don't- I don't want them
I'm
to run
gonna,
away.
I didn't say I'm gonna
Don't
let them go. I'm gonna let you talk your story. They gotta
Okay.
hit.
Yeah, okay.
I'm gonna let Nither
So-
story. Nither has an update on something that is very interesting in the
Don't
story.
leave. I wanted them to be part of the
Giants are
story.
winning.
They gotta
And
hit that. They
the
gotta.
Giants are more important. That's, all right, that's it. I have no words. Okay, so I don't know if Tazo wants to put up the graphic or how we want to. Is Tazo listening? He's not listening. Okay, so
Tazo. Graphic. Let's go.
of the police chief. So this past week
That's him.
and. So this is okay. Where do I even begin with this story?
Look at
so
that
this
mustache. Oh God.
This is the former police chief of Bordentown Township in New Jersey, who is now on trial for federal hate crime charges. And I'm sure a lot of people saw this story because during the trial this week, it actually began last Friday and went on through this week. They have been playing audio, which another cop secretly recorded him, worked in conjunction with the FBI and secretly recorded him for a year and got him on tape. This is the officer who recorded him. Officer Rohr is his name. And got him on tape making all sorts of outrageous statements like the N-words need to stay the F out of our town. I'm sick of them. They're like ISIS. I want to line them all up and mow them down. And this is a police chief. And then he also said during the 2016 election, because that's when a lot of this recording happened, he also said that Donald Trump was the last hope for white people and Hillary was only for minorities. And all of this stuff, I mean, it was hours of audio that was being played in the courtroom. And all of this has come to light because this officer secretly recorded him because in 2016 it was a Ramada Hotel, I believe, yes, in Bordentown, where a young black teenager, I think he was 18 at the time, 18 years old, there he is, was with his girlfriend swimming in a pool. And like many other incidents, this is how unfortunately it happens, where the person, I'm not sure if it was a hotel manager or somebody on duty, called police because they thought they weren't staying at the hotel and were just swimming at the pool. So they called police. Long story short, the cops show up, and as he's being, according to Officer Rohr, as he's being let out in handcuffs, this police chief slammed his head, the kid's head, into a metal door jamb.
Damn.
And this is why. So once again, I just want to say the only reason that this has come to light is because another officer outed him. So it's like when people say things. Now I will backtrack and talk about my own personal connection to this story, because 14 years ago, so my parents were living in this town. And my father came out of a grocery store, and Judge knows this very well because Judge came in later on into the case, but my dad was hit by a car, and he basically flew back and hit the back of his head on the ground, sustained massive trauma, head injuries, and he was basically struggling to talk, and he lost his ability to speak, just mumbling and rambling. And instead of, when the police and EMT arrived on the scene, instead of thinking that, some of his neurological functions may have been impacted, they assumed he couldn't speak English. They put a language barrier in their report. They sent my dad to a non-trauma hospital, even though trauma facility was the same distance away. And I was visiting my parents that weekend, and I was the first one who got to the hospital, and I basically heard my dad's last words. Like, he could barely talk, but he did talk a little bit with me. I asked him if he remembered being hit by a car, and he said no. And my dad did not, his eyes closed, and then after that point, they never opened again. And he was throwing up blood. He had massive internal injuries, and he didn't get transferred to a trauma facility until 5 hours later. And by that time, he fell into a coma, and then he died 3 days later. Now, we ended up, this is a whole fiasco that went on because the cops, we ended up finding out, refused witness statements at the scene. They never checked the driver for drugs or alcohol. We found out they never even reported the incident to the DMV's fatality unit, because the fatality unit can even suspend a driver's license on their own. And there was a whole, there was so much nonsense.
Investigation that could lead to
Exactly.
Right.
And so there, and the police department wasn't returning our phone calls. The police chief at the time, so this guy knew Sarah, his name is, he was the deputy chief when my dad died. And the chief of police went to a local paper and made statements on his own without even returning our phone calls and telling us what exactly happened. We're trying to piece together what went on. And even days later, they made statements, there's no way the driver was speeding, even though my uncle and I ended up finding witnesses on our own who said that the person who killed him was in fact speeding, was driving recklessly. It's a whole, I could
Wasn't
go
there a
through.
trial on this?
A trial on.
There was no trial on this.
On
Nothing
who?
for your
No.
father.
So this is another thing too. The county. So this is Burlington County. They closed their quote unquote investigation about the driver literally the day after my dad died, 1 day later. So I had the county reopen the case. I also brought up my concerns that there was a culture of racism, negligence, and corruption within this police department. And the county, supposedly, they claimed they did their investigation and they found no wrongdoing, of course. And I even went to, at the time, I think it was the Deputy Attorney General's office. They didn't really do anything either except sending me a letter saying, we don't see any wrongdoing here. And I always maintain, this went on for so long. I can't even remember how long this went on. Months, years. All that whole era is like a blank to me now. But I remember I was always yelling up and down and screaming that there was a culture of racism, negligence, and nobody listened. And now to see, and this guy, so again, he was deputy chief and then moved up the ranks and became chief of police and also the town administrator. So he was in charge of hiring and firing. You talk about all kinds of levels of corruption. And it was interesting that another officer, so I went to a lot of this, the trial, and another officer testified saying that for a very long time, they raised their concerns about New Sarah to the county, to Burlington County, and they did nothing. And an officer even testified that one time the county prosecutor was there because apparently there were allegations made by another officer, and the county prosecutor, as he walked out, said to New Sarah, "Don't worry, you have nothing to worry about," and winked at him and walked out of the precinct.
Good old boys network.
So exactly. So it's my point, and what I've always said is how do you as a civilian, when you know there's wrongdoing going on, when you know there's some same nonsense, racism, corruption. How do you prove that? It's your word against an entire department system. And again, the only reason this is happening is because another officer outed him out, and this is where we are. And let's see what happens, like if he's found guilty. So he's actually facing 3 charges. So I forgot the second one. I think basically it's still like a civil rights violation, and then the third one is lying to the FBI. So let's see, because the defense's entire argument is, oh yeah, he may have said some words and some things that weren't nice, but he didn't bash this kid's head in. And we can't let social justice warriors take over. And I'm like, oh God. I was like, who put Fox News on in the courtroom? So I'm like, let's see, because the jury also, so it's a jury of 14, and there's only 3 people of color on the jury, I believe, or 3 black women, and that's it.
At least they got some blacks on
I know,
there.
so I'm like, let's see. I mean, you never know. The jury could,
They may
let's
come
see.
back.
You
Let's
never
see what
know.
happens.
We'll see what happens. So
again, to lose a parent like that, suddenly is taken, and neither was here, and it's not easy for her to do the story. I really don't talk to you much about it when you even want to talk about it, because I know it's tough. And I can't empathize there. I could sympathize. Even though I lost my parents, I didn't lose them to a tragedy like that. And I look at you now again, offer condolences. It's not easy, and your pain is there, and and I think that if they can convict him, there will be at least a little piece of justice. You can't bring your father back, but there'll be a little bit of that his death wasn't in vain. So I pray that this comes out in the way it should come out, because these racist pieces of boop, just don't deserve to be there. I'm
thank
like,
you. I appreciate that.
You deserve that.
Well, we
It's
had
not,
a
and
good we had a good show today. We talked about a lot of very
also,
good issues.
Judge, I also want to give you props too, because when this happened, like my family and I were screwed over by 2 different attorneys, and then about a year and a half into all of this, that's when Pickett came over and took over the case and just helping my family navigate through this. And you saw a lot of the court hearings and the madness. And I remember, like, because this was 2005, so I had I worked as a production assistant at NBC here. And so my former assignment editor put me in touch with NBC Philadelphia, because they cover that part of Jersey. And there was a reporter from there who came to some of our court hearings, like an investigative reporter and her camera guy. And after one of the proceedings, even she had tears in her eyes, and she talked to my mother and I outside the courthouse, because she said they treated you and your mom like you were the criminals and not the victims. Wow. In there. So it was like, and I was like, thank you, because it was finally a third person who saw that and witnessed it. Wow. And her piece, unfortunately, no, her piece never aired, and I don't know why. And that's why, like, exactly. And I'm like, you guys have, like, the amount of frustration, because it's like I couldn't do anything. And especially at that time, I was so young. So it's like I tried to do whatever I could think of, whatever was in my power, whatever,
young had nothing to do with it, but you did what you did. You
but
fought
whatever.
for it.
But it's like, but even then, it's like you can't do. It's so hard when it's your word.
When you're going up against the establishment,
against them.
And I don't understand why they tend to thrive. Larry and Bob and why do these people tend to thrive when you get these people? If I walked around this job and insulted my coworkers, I'd get kicked out the building. Mm-hmm. But then there's these nasty people. I worked at Citibank with certain people. I not a broad brush, but I tell the truth. I worked with Citibank, and I took them to task. But see, I'm the different kind of. I'll take it to HR. But see, if you're not gonna stand for me, I'll stand for myself. I'm like Yusuf. When Yusuf Hawkins got killed, Moses Stewart was his father. And when we did Oprah Winfrey show, that was the first time that Oprah did a show where there was no guest up there. And when those white folks started talking about, well, maybe your son this and that, and you know that his son, Yusuf Hawkins, did not, he just was accompanying a friend to go get in a car in Bensonhurst and was shot and killed by Joey Farmer.
Right.
And, those white folks say that, Moses was like, I'll kick your so-and-so and I'll kick your, right on national television because he didn't take it. And I'm
Right.
like that, man. I'm
Right.
not the one that's going to get up there and say, I forgive everybody. I'm not that one. If you do,
Yeah.
you don't, I'm not a,
I feel you, Fatim, because even this, like, yeah, they're not the ones who directly killed him, but their negligence and their racism and their shoddy work, all of that, and the lying and the whatever contributed absolutely to a lot of what happened to my family and to my dad and to all of us. And like, and like my family, like my mom and my sisters are like, why are you going to this trial? Like, why are you doing this to yourself? And I'm like, no, I need to. I was like, first of all, I'm a journalist and this is a huge story. Like, why wouldn't I be there? And then there's such a huge personal connection. Of course, I want to be there as much as I can. I plan on writing about it. I want to talk about it.
But you're not. But you don't feel that your family should be there. That's something that.
No,
this
I mean
is
that's
your
a personal
choice.
right, exactly. And I was like, everybody has their own way of dealing with stuff, and I was like, this is me. This is
Right.
this
Well,
is my way of doing it.
Again, you'll keep us posted on this.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely. Well, we have to end today. We've been going a long time. I got the mic up, guys. Just want to say condolences goes out to the Jimmy Spicer family. Hip hop pioneer, legend, personal friend of mine. I grew up with brother Jimmy Spicer, Super Rhymes, out there in the borough of Brooklyn, and he lost his battle with cancer this past Friday. And we again offer our condolences to the Jimmy Spicer family. I don't have any arrangements or any information, but I know that the hip hop community will turn out large for this brother, one of the first, if not the first, hip hop artists that was put on wax, on record, out of the borough of Brooklyn. I'm not sure. Someone said that to me this morning. I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to put that out there. That's true, but someone mentioned that to me this morning. So, but with that said, this has been another good week. As you was getting ready to say, Bob Pickett, a lot of information that we discussed out here.
Yes, indeed.
Larry and Nilla, and of course, Bobby and Jamie had to scoot on out and handle their sports assignments today.
Excellent subject matters today.
Yes, and we thank you all for participating. And I gotta commend all of you that participate on the stream. I want to thank our production staff back there for the work that they do, because Bob Slade did that. He always said, Fatim Muhammad is the producer and this, that, and all. And I want to make sure, I ain't got Tazo's name, but I always want to make sure I have the other brother's name. Everybody that works on the staff, I always want to give the proper shout out to them because they all deserve it. Joe Engel. There you go. Joe Engel and Brother Tazo. I appreciate your work. And Brother Pickett, I'll let you end the show today.
Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Well, thank you for joining us. And as we always say, we'll see you same time, same place next week as we talk about the issues that are important to you and your community. God bless.